All right, we're going to get started here, guys. Who was here last session? A few people. So we talked about how it's all qualitative and all this jazz, right? The bottom line is before you have a lot of customers, yeah, it'd be great to do A/B testing and all this jazz, but before you launch your product, you don't have customers, right? So that's why I'm big on the qualitative. Once you launch, then now you can actually use quantitative. So it's not an either or, like one's good and one is bad. It's just using the right tool at the right phase. So today, this talk that the last talk I gave was more like blue sky, building a new product, new feature. It's very qualitative. This is, okay, now we've got a product in market. How can we use analytics to improve it? That's the idea of this talk, right? So for those of you that weren't here last time, my background, I've been coding since I was 10. I have a double E. I'm kind of a technical background. Started out my career doing submarine design. After doing that for 5 years, I realized I wanted to go get an MBA, and I moved out to Silicon Valley, went to Stanford. That's where I learned about product management as a career. I said, that sounds awesome. That's what I want to do. Where's the best place to learn since I've never done it? And people said Intuit. And I was fortunate to get a job at Intuit, and it totally was a great place to learn product management, marketing, UX design. Like 70% of it's in the book, and then this talk is, well, not this talk, some of it's in this, but is basically from Intuit. After Intuit, I was a leader at a few startups. I wanted to do my own startup, so I scratched that itch back in 2009. That was a lot of fun. But what I've been doing now for 9 years is actually consulting, product management consulting, and helping companies on all the things that I'm talking about today at various stages. I also love sharing best practices. So 4 years ago, I started a monthly speaker series in Mountain View called Lean Product, Lean UX. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But we have over 6,500 product people that are in it. Bring in top speakers that you normally would be at a $1,000 conference. You can come in for $20 and eat dinner and see them. So on Twitter, I'm at Dan Olsen. That's important if you want to try to win a book. And then I post all my slides and videos at my website, dan-olsen.com. All right. So actually, yeah, that's right. Since this is the second session, I think I thought I'd share something that's actually not in the book. It's one of the most closely guarded product management secrets, and that's the product management motto. Product management motto. Does anyone know Spider-Man's motto here? Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You got it. With great power comes great responsibility. Good job. You'd be surprised. I speak to tech audiences, and I'll be like 100 people, and like no one gets. I'm like, really, guys? Come on. All right, that's right. So product manager's motto is similar, but it's a little different. And it's with great responsibility comes no power. We're all laughing on the outside. We're crying. Sad but true, right? So we're responsible for a lot of things, especially if we're missing some key people in our company. One of the things that we're mainly responsible for is product market fit, right? So, let me go back. Someone's take a picture. All right. Okay. It's product market fit, right? And this is a term that was actually coined by Mark Andreessen back in 2007 in a blog post called The Only Thing That Matters, and it became more popular with Lean Startup movement, kind of made it more popular. The funny thing is, people talk about it in a very simplistic way. They'll be like, hey, Box succeeded because they had product market fit. Startup X, sadly, they failed. They did not have product market fit. It's just like the simple true or false thing, but people don't tell you how to actually achieve it. So that's one of the big reasons I wrote this book. After I've been speaking since 2007 and talking to different product groups and consulting, I realized, hey, there's actually a formula and a process that we can apply. That's what I talked about in my last talk. I'm going to be giving a book away on Twitter, so just tweet, and I'll notify someone during the lunch break. If there's a photo of a slide you like, and then the hashtag for this event is SVCamp, SVPCamp, or if you want to throw on product management. But basically, my last talk was how to get validate things before you launch. Once you've launched, now we can use the power of analytics. And actually, I had a big eye-opening moment at Intuit early in my PM career. I used to work on Quicken. Quicken was CD-ROM, which launched once a year, and we did our best. We did this qualitative research. We did quantitative research, surveys, to figure out what do people want, what's going to make them upgrade. We did beta testing. We did usability testing. And then we put it all on a CD-ROM and shipped it. And then the feedback we got was, oh yeah, we sold 10,000 units last month at Fry's. Nothing like which features did they use, which ones did they like, what did they not like, what bugs did they run into. I mean, some would come for customer support, but just no real data except high-level sales data. Not really actionable at the detailed product level. I went from that to doing an online product at Intuit. We launched. And the next day, we're like, how many people signed up? Oh, we got 300 people signed up. Wow, cool. And the next day, how many signed up today? 500. All right, cool. You get daily data, right? It's the exact opposite, right? I'm like, wow, well, how many people signed up online versus via paper? Oh, let's go look at that. Oh, how many people did that? We asked all these questions and we started instrumenting it. And it's like, as a manager, having all that data gave me more leverage to optimize things. So I had that epiphany. So just like there's a process for the other part of it, which is the lean product process, I have an analytics process for how to go about starting from scratch with analytics and getting to the point having a way to decide which ones to improve. And so I want to walk you guys through that. The first step is figuring out what your metrics are, right? That's just step one, is like what metrics matter here and what are we tracking. The next step is let's start measuring them and getting baseline values. And maybe some of you, it's like a maturity model. Some of you may already be here. Some of you may have new products where you haven't even instrumented it yet, right? And I would mention there's always usually a metrics hygiene phase here where you're like, yeah, we're tracking unique users, but it's like 5 times off what Google Analytics does. You realize there's some bugs or the JavaScript isn't quite doing what you want or you're not quite sure what the label means. After you have some accurate baseline values, then you want to look across your metrics and say, hey, which one do we think offers the biggest ROI or upside? Right? We want to figure out which one to focus on that we think is going to make the biggest difference if we work on it. And this is all at the global product or business level, right? Where you haven't yet got into a specific metric. But once you do this and you're looking across all your metrics, say, I think that's the one that's going to offer the biggest opportunity, then you pick that top metric and we go into a metric-specific optimization, right? We say, okay, great, we think conversion rate is the thing we want to focus on. Let's go into and focus on improving conversion rate. Then we basically want to brainstorm as a team. This is fun. What are all the different ways we think we can improve the conversion rate, right? Then we want to, try to do some ROI estimation. How much do we think it's going to improve the conversion? For each idea, how much will it improve the conversion rate, and how much resources is it going to take? So we can figure out the highest ROI that we expect. Let's design it, implement it, and roll it out, and let's see how the metric changes. And hopefully it goes up and to the right. But even if it doesn't, there's value because you've learned through this process. Like, oh, we thought this was going to improve conversion rate, but it didn't, right? And you're going to iterate, and you're going to keep working on stuff. And you'll eventually find something that will move the needle on that metric. And then you'll find something else. And over time, what will happen is the low-hanging fruit will be gone, and you'll just be like, you get diminishing returns. Like, oh man, okay, we've done the obvious stuff. Now it's just getting harder and harder. So at some point, it makes sense to stop focusing on that metric and go back to the list of all the metrics and say, okay, conversion rate, that's pretty good. What's the next one now that we should be working on to improve value? So this is a macro view of the mentality and the process of how we go about, identifying metrics to focus on and how to improve them. Now, there are a bazillion different metrics that you can measure, and so it can be helpful to just get your head around everything, to have a high-level framework. And there's actually a high-level framework that a friend of mine created that applies to all businesses. It's called Startup Metrics for Pirates, or R. Who's heard of this before? Okay, cool, right. It was like R, because it spells R, that's the acronym, it's called Startup Metrics for Pirates. So the 5 things, the first starts out with acquisition. It's also just a good way to think about your business, but it starts out with acquisition. So say we've got a brand new website that's selling our product. Acquisition is how do we get people that aren't aware of our product, prospects, to get to the point where they can learn about our product and become customers. Right? That's basically what acquisition is all about. The next one is activation. Okay, if they come to our website, how do we convert them? How good a job are we doing at converting those prospects into customers, whether it's at the App Store or on our website or our sales channel, whatever the heck it is. How are we doing on activation? This is also called conversion. I would call this conversion, but then it would mess up the acronym. It would be ACR. It wouldn't quite be as cool as R. The next one is, okay, they became customers and now they're using our product. But as we know, customers don't use our product forever. Some of them stick around and keep using it and remain active, and some don't. That's where the retention comes in. The next one is referral. So hopefully, by virtue of people using our product, they're telling their friends about it and saying, hey, you really got to check out this product, right? That could be word of mouth referral. If we have some kind of social network or social product or Slack, it could be like literal viral referral because you're inviting people and things like that, right? This is the one that varies the most. Like if you're doing B2B enterprise software, then this may not be as important. It's not like one CMO is calling up the other CMOs and you got to use the software. So that one may not apply as much, but the other 4 definitely apply to every business. Conversely, if you've got some game or some social product where that is critical, you may want to validate that first. And finally, revenue. By virtue of using your product, you're generating revenue. Either they're paying you or you're monetizing it some other way, right? So the beauty of this framework is this applies to every business, these 5. Again, referral may not apply as much to B2B, but these 5 apply. And what the idea is it's a mental map, and you can say, hey, for our business, which area do we think is offering the biggest upside? What do we need to be focusing on right now? Right, out of these 5 areas. It's a way to winnow things down in a sea of different metrics and say, what do we need to focus on? And what you want to do is basically focus on the right metric at the right time. The one that's going to offer the biggest value is going to change over time as you do a good job on one, right? And so I call that the metric that matters most. Like right now, which one, based on our best, estimates, which one do we think is going to offer the biggest opportunity to improve the business? Let's take a little microcosm of this. Let's talk about just acquisition, conversion, and retention, right? Acquisition is getting prospects to your site. Conversion is converting them to customers, however you define that. And then retention is holding on to them once they become customers. Let's say we had a new product. I would argue for most new products, there's an ideal order of these three. That's what I mean by metric that matters most. Which one should we tackle first, second, and third? Who thinks we should tackle acquisition? We should optimize acquisition first for a new product. Who thinks we should optimize conversion first for a new product? Who thinks we should optimize retention first for a new product, right? Cool. So let me walk through why I have a certain order. Have you guys heard the leaky bucket analogy? Right? The idea is leaky bucket. The idea is the water is your customers. The ones that are in the bucket are the ones you're holding on to, and the ones that are falling out are the ones that you're losing, basically, right? So let me actually draw it out. Let's start with conversion. Your customers are in the bucket. Prospective customers are the water that's trying to get in the bucket. Some gets in the bucket, some doesn't get in the bucket, right? Basically, right? So that's what conversion is. Like, what percentage of the water you're trying to get in the bucket? What percentage of customers that are coming to your site fall into the bucket and become customers, right? That's basically conversion. What does good conversion look like? Getting all the water in the bucket. That's what good conversion looks like. None of it's spilling out, right? None of it's missing the bucket. Second thing, acquisition. How much water are you actually spraying? Like, what's the volume of water, right? If you have a trickle, if you're like, hey, we're getting 10 prospects a day showing up at our site, that's a little trickle. If you have like, no, we have 1 million people coming to our site every day, that's a big one, right? What does great acquisition look like? It looks like this. It's a high volume of water going at the bucket. So it has nothing to do with your accuracy of getting water in the bucket. It just has to do with how much water can we get spraying at the bucket, basically. And then finally, retention is, okay, we got the water in the bucket. Over time, what percentage is staying in the bucket versus leaking out? That's what retention is, right? So great retention is this, like you have very, no holes or very small holes or very few holes so that the water leaks out, right? So given that mentality, that analogy, for most products, I actually think it makes the most sense to start with retention. Why would you go and like spend money to get a bunch of water and just have it all leak if you got a leaky bucket, right? You're not gonna get an effective ROI on your marketing spend if you've got a leaky bucket. And the sad thing is almost every product when it first launches is a very, very leaky bucket. Right. The second thing is conversion. Like same thing. Why would we spend money to like improve our actually getting in the bucket if then again all the water is going to fall out? So the first thing to do is to shore up your bucket. It's going to have some leaks no matter what, but just make sure it's not a big gaping hole and button it up. The next thing is conversion. Right. Conversion optimization on your site. Now when you do go spend money on acquisition, then a higher percentage are going to convert and a higher percentage are going to go into the bucket. So that's not gospel for every new product or every business, but it's a way of explaining why it makes sense for this to be the first one, the second, and the third that matters the most at that point in time. All right, and I like to ask this a certain way too. There's a lot of measures we could track, but say we had a new product and we just launched it, and we specifically wanted to know how are we doing on product market fit, and we only wanted to have one metric. What metric would you track for a new product to track to see how you're doing with product market fit? Retention. Any other?
Conversion.
Huh? Conversion, okay.
G7 users.
G7 users, all right. Nice. Any other things? Anyone care about money? Revenue, yeah. Any other answers? Sometimes they get NPS. Engagement, NPS. Right. So one thing I talk about when it comes to analytics is there is what's called attitudinal, which is people saying, I'm saying something, or I'm going to do something, and there's behavioral, which is I'm actually doing something, right? So the thing about NPS, is it behavioral or attitudinal? It's attitudinal. Now, I'm not poo-pooing NPS, it's good, but you got to recognize it's attitudinal, not behavioral. So I can be like, yeah, I'll totally recommend your product, and then they don't do it, right? But so it's a way to get at it. In a lot of cases, again, you want to try to triangulate. But I think that for me, and this just came up again. Has anyone here, do you have a favorite movie that you've seen more than once?
300.
300 times? Which movie?
No, the movie 300.
Spartan! All right, he's a Spartan. All right, good. Yeah, good. So for me, it's funny. Ready Player One just came out. I've read that book 3 times. I read a lot of other books. I don't read them yet. Why do you see a movie more than once or you read a book more than once? Because you like it. Same thing with a product. Right? I can do a great job on my acquisition, a great job on my conversion, and say, this product's going to be the best for you. Then you sign up. If it meets your needs, well, you're going to come back and use it again. If it doesn't meet your needs, are you ever going to come back? You're not. It's just like your favorite book or movie, right? So for me, retention rate is the #1 thing for product market fit. And it's basically, it tracks what percentage of people come back over time. So it's behavioral, not attitudinal. It's a behavioral measure. And I didn't have to talk about this yet either, but basically, there are absolute, I'll talk about this in a sec, there are absolute number of metrics and there are ratio metrics. So we want to have a ratio metric here, like percentage. So we don't just say, hey, 1,000 people came back, we do a percentage. What percentage of users come back over time, right? This is basically how much water is left in the bucket over time. This is the water draining out. And so what this is saying is percentage of users returning since the first day, right? It's a certain way of keeping track of the time of when the user came, right? So say we launched our product last month, February, right? Some people signed up on February 1st, some people signed up on February 15th. But what we're doing is we're indexing their behavior back to relative to when they first signed up and taking all the people in February, basically all in one group, right? And what happens is, and this is days since first use, so what this is basically saying, a couple things with this curve. One is, you notice it doesn't go up to 100%. Why? Well, sadly, about 80% of people will never come back and use it again. And this is real data for mobile app. Mobile app's brutal, right? Say you tell me about some cool app and I install it and I go, didn't I play with it for a few minutes? Oh, then I get a phone call. Okay, close it, bye. Am I going to remember to go to screen 11 and find that cool app again? I'm not. That's why they're like, please turn on notifications, please accept notifications, because they want to be able to get back to you, right? But that's what happens. So that could be because they didn't meet their needs or they just forgot about it. You don't know why, but 80% never came back. It's brutal, right? So I could make the graph go to 100%. I just have a bunch of white space. It would make the graph harder to read. So most people just truncate it to what the day one returning is. There's always a gap. Nobody has 100% day one. Then it goes down, usually sharply, and then it starts to flatten out. At the end, it can do one of two things. I've shown a rosy picture here where we hold on to some water. But usually, especially for new products, it goes to 0. It may take 90 days. It may take 60 days. It may take 30 days. I was just with a client the other day, and we popped up their data, and they were sad to see that they had 1% 7-day retention. After 7 days, only 1% of the water was left in their bucket. Right? That's how products are. That's how most products are, unless you're looking at it and focusing on it, right? So what this is saying is this product is holding on to about 3% of the water. Right? After about 80 days, 97% of those customers stop using it and the water falls out. Yeah.
Just trying to understand this correct. So what is 100 here? I mean, first day you're giving 20.
It's
so
the percent. Everyone that signed up, everyone that became a customer.
So
they became a customer.
Prior to the first day of sale, how did that number 100?
No, they have to be a customer. However you define customer, they put in their credit card, they registered, whatever it is. They use your product for the first time as a customer, and then we're tracking. Okay, great. In February, we had 1,000 people use our product and sign up as new customers. Let's keep track of when they came back. That's all. That's the percentage. That's what you're dividing by, right? So this would mean like, hey, day 1, 200 of the 1,000 came back. 800 we never saw again. And by day 80, only 3% are coming back again. Now, when you have a new product, you can lump all the users into one bucket and keep track of them. Over time, though, you're eventually going to be like, okay, our product's been around for a year now. It's probably better. Maybe the newer users have a better retention rate than the older users. So we want to do cohort analysis. And what cohort means is just dividing our user base into different segments. It's typically done by when they sign up. So let's say, hey, let's take the guys that signed up in January, and that's one cohort. Let's take the people who signed up in February. That's another cohort. Let's take March. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be by acquisition channel or any other segmentation criteria. But this is what it looks like when you have, say, 3 cohorts. Again, percentage of users returning since the first time they used it as a customer. And now it's weeks since they signed up or used it versus days. And we have 3 cohorts. We have A, which is the blue triangles, B, the red squares, C is the green triangle, sorry. And I want you to imagine this is your product and you've got these 3 cohorts. Think about which cohort would you want to be your cohort for your product. Let's just do a survey real quick. Who wants A? Who wants B? Who wants C? Did you guys have a secret meeting before this? Say, when Dan put the cohort thing up, let's all say C. You have a PhD in retention rate that I don't know about? So when you look at the data, it's just intuitively obvious, right? So why is C the best, guys?
The retention is highest.
Oh, no, blue. That's the highest, right there, 50.
No, the end rate it is
not the beginning, right?
over the period of time.
You saying the end matters more in the beginning?
No, the change is
a one-time sale.
Yes.
No, it actually doesn't. We'll talk about that. But some people think that. Some people think that, but it's not. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, right?
the change is less.
Yeah.
It depends, right? How many people are there, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe, but so basically the bottom line is your brains know, right, when you look at the data this way, that what matters the most is where does this curve end up at the end. It doesn't matter up here that this started out because we end up losing all the water anyway, right? So most people pick C because this is higher up here, right? So usually in the last session I get the statistical significant question. Hey Dan, you're talking to 5 to 8 users at a time. How do you really know you have product market fit? This is behavioral data. If you have enough people, it can be statistically significant. The magic answer is wherever, if your curve goes to 0, you don't have product market fit. The higher it flattens out in asymptotes, the more product market fit you have. So if you're like, Dan, I'm really rigorous, I want to know how I'm doing on product market fit, track your retention rate, and that will tell you where you're at, basically. And if it doesn't go to 0, then you've got a certain level, and the higher it is, the better, right? And what you want to see over time when you realize this is, okay, as our product gets better, yeah, we launched our MVP. As we work on it, listen to customers, fix bugs, fix UX, add features, understand how to message and sell it better, it should go up over time. So what does that look like? Say that 24 months ago we launched our rough MVP V1, and that was the retention rate. So after 12 months, we were only holding on to 5% of people. And in the next 6 months, we spent all this time interviewing users and figuring out what their needs were and making a better job. We would hope to see something like this. That if we looked at that next cohort of people 6 months later, it would be higher. And most importantly, that the tail end of this would be higher. And then if we did the same thing again for 6 months, hopefully we would see that, right? So you want to see that final terminal value go up over time. That means you're improving product market fit. And I like to back this stuff up with real data when I can. I was excited that somebody published some real retention curve data from the Android App Store. And they did cohorts in a certain way. The way they did the cohorts, you can see there's 4 cohorts. Again, percentage of users still active, days since app install. They took the top 10 apps from the App Store, and that's the red cohort. Then they took the next 50, and that's the next cohort. Then they took the next 100, that's that cohort, and finally, right? You see what's going on? The best apps that have the highest level of product market fit have the highest terminal value of retention rate. It's not a coincidence. It's because of the best apps are the ones that have the highest product market fit. Right? And if we took, the bottom 10,000, they would go to 0 for sure. Like, it would just, so anyway. So that's why I really think it's important to start with retention rate, using retention curves to see who here is tracking retention on their products. Okay, so yeah. I would argue you don't really know how you're doing with product market fit if you're not tracking retention rate. And real quick, then the next thing, if you're up for doing it, the question becomes, how do we do it? Some people may try to build it in-house. It's a lot of work to build in-house, and it probably will have issues and not get it right, and you have a bunch of other things contending for those dev resources time. Some of the best analytic packages, third-party out there, just have it baked in. So Mixpanel, part of why Mixpanel became so popular and kind of overtook GA in certain segments, even though it wasn't free like GA, Google Analytics, is because they nailed the retention rate tracking. Right? They made you just get it if you want to do it. Amplitude Analytics is another one that does it as well too. So the bottom line is, if you want to track retention rate, don't worry about trying to build it yourself. Just use one of these third-party tools, and they have free tiers. You can try them out, things like that.
What's the first one you mentioned?
Mixpanel and Amplitude Analytics. All right. So at some point, we've got the start a metric for pirates. I argue you should start with retention, then conversion, then acquisition. At some point, once your bucket's not leaky enough and conversion's good, the cool thing about that framework is it applies to every business. But at some point, the flip side is it's not specific for your business. At some point, you need to say, how do I optimize my business once my retention and conversion and acquisition is good? And when I want to optimize something, again, I'm a quant guy, so I want to express it as an equation. And so I have this concept called the equation of your business, where you can basically express your business as an equation. And you want to basically peel the onion and get to the point where we've got a lot of different metrics that we could be tracking and trying to optimize. So I'm going to do that for an advertising business model. Say you have a product that's monetized based on ads. Like imagine any content site like BuzzFeed or something like that, right? If a lot of people are like, that sounds great, but where do I start? I don't know what the equation is. You can always start with profit equals revenue minus cost. That applies to every business, and for most tech businesses, we don't worry about the cost. The marginal cost isn't that high. The marginal revenue is what we care about the most, because as we get more volume, it will go down the cost. And the idea is we want to peel the onions for our business. So, and by the way, this is for any given time period. Right? Revenue is not actionable. If you say, hey, we want to grow revenue 10%, that's not actionable. We want to get to the point where we have actionable metrics. This is for a given period of time, like a month or a week or whatever, right? So revenue for an advertising business, we can break that down mathematically and say it's how many unique visitors came during that month times, if we take all the ad revenue we made that month and divide it by the number of visitors, we can come up with some average ad revenue per visitor. Does that make sense? So this is very common to break down revenue into number of people and how much we made per person, right? In the subscription world or something, that might be ARPU, average revenue per user, and users. But in an advertising world, they don't have to be users, they can be visitors. Ad revenue per visitor, how does that get determined for a given month? Well, it gets determined by when the visitors come, how many ad impressions do they generate, right? In that month, how many ad impressions did each visitor generate on average, right? 5 on average, times some effective CPM. And because CPM has a factor, that's like dollar per 1,000 impressions, and because it has a factor of 1,000, is it divided by 1,000, right? The idea is we can write this out longhand. We could totally replace revenue with that equation if we wanted to, right? The next thing is great, impressions per visitor. You know, if the average visitor generates 5 impressions in a given month, how do we determine that? How can we break that down? Well, it's how many times did they come in that month, visits per visitor? Did they come to your site 3 times or 2 times or 5 times? On average, when they visited, how many page views did they generate? Was it 5 page views or 10 per session? And then on any given page view, on average, how many impressions are there? Right? Did they generate 2 ad impressions or 3 ad impressions? Right? So you can see, and I use advertising, it's not as common, but I use it because you can really break it down into granular things that are actionable. Right? Revenue is not actionable, but these things are actionable. Page views per visit. If we said, you know what, that's what we think offers the biggest way to grow our revenue. Right? If we improve this 10%, how much does revenue go up? 10%, because it's just multiplication, right? Say I wanted to improve pages per visit on a content site. How would I do that? So when people come to my site, instead of having 3 page views, I want to get them to do like 7 or 8 page views when they come to my site. How would I do that?
Related content, right?
Related content's one way, yeah.
So you just break up the content.
You chop it up. You ever go to sites like the top 10 list? Here's number 1. Click. Here's number 2. That's because some PM on that team said, all right, we're going to optimize this, and they do that. Related content is another way. Yep. How about visits per visitor? Hey, they're only coming once a month. Let's see if we can get them to come 3 times a month. How do I do that?
Refresh the content.
Yeah, more frequent content might get me to come back. Yeah, more frequently.
Email.
Emails and reminders. That's right. Hey, here's Flipboard. Here's 10 articles you might like. You know, because you're not going to go to Flipboard every day, but if they send you that, then you're going to go check it out. That's right. And then finally, impressions per page view. How do we improve that? Increase that. Yeah, you just put, hey, there's 2 ads per page. Let's put 5 on each page, right? That's like, then you just grew that, right? But then what will happen? The visits per visitor might go down. So there's like, it's kind of like it can become a whack-a-mole. But that's the idea, right? So these are very actionable. We as a product people can say, all right, we think this is the best one. Let's chop up the content, or let's do related content, right? That's the idea. And this is just on the revenue side. Back on the visitor side, it's almost always a good idea to distinguish between new users or visitors and returning. What that means is who became a new user in the month that we're talking about. So in February, who became a new user? And who came to use our site in February that was a returning visitor, right? And that's important for retention, to distinguish between those two. And then let's say on our site, new visitors, we had like some kind of viral loop and some non-viral loop, and then we could break down the viral loop into the viral looping, right? So we start out with something very high, and this isn't the only way to peel the onion, but it's a way to make it very actionable. Now we as a team can say, great, we've got this metric, this metric, this metric, this metric, this metric, this metric. What do we think, which one offers the highest ROI? Which one is the metric that matters the most for our business right now? We want to grow revenue, right? We can have a discussion and debate about it, right? And then once you pick that one, you can then pick the ideas. And I wanted to show you how to track the data. It's just a daily time series is pretty much the way I like to think about it. So for a given metric, that's this registration page conversion rate. Here's the data. This is from real data from 9 months. And you'll see there's wide swings in the data. But every swing in the data is because of something we did either on purpose or by accident. So we started out around 30-some%, right? Just baseline. Let's start measuring our baseline, 30%. Are we happy with a 30% conversion rate on a reg page? No, we're not happy with that. So we changed some messaging. Oh, but I should mention, by the way, this product, you could use it without registering, up to certain things you could do without registering. Then if you registered, which is mean email password, we had your email, then you could use some more stuff. And then finally we had like a paid tier. But the idea was we changed the messaging as to why, all the cool stuff you'd get if you registered, and it shot up to like 50-something, right? And then I did usability tests on the registration page, and we found that there was like too many fields on there, and there wasn't validation on there. So we kind of cleaned up the UX and usability of it, right? I said, hey, do we really need this field? Killed some fields, made some fields optional, added JavaScript validation, server-side validation. It ended up being like this nice minimalistic white space reg page, and so got up there to like almost 70%. Marketing saw the new reg page and said, wow, there's a lot of real estate on that page. Let's add some demographic questions. I'm like, are you really ever even going to look at that data, guys? Come on. And there's like, so they slapped it, go do it. They slapped it on. Boom. Big hit, right? All of a sudden, more questions on this nice minimalistic page that we had. And then finally, there was like a key feature that used to be you didn't have to register to get, and then we moved it into the registration paywall, not paywall, registration wall, and that shot up to 80%, right? But if you're not looking at this data and you think of all the product changes and decisions you guys are making every week, if you're not looking at this data, you are flying blind. You wouldn't know that you just went off a cliff because somebody pushed the wrong code or changed something or changed the UX or something like that, right? All right, and then the way I like to think about my metrics is like this. And it may look funny. This is a specific, I wouldn't expect anybody to know what this is called, but there's a certain word for this thing. Does anybody know what that word is? Yeah, it's a dashboard, that's right. Yeah, but this isn't a ship. It's kind of a dashboard. That's like in a car. These are a ship. What are these things?
Dials.
Dials or gauges. They're called gauges or dials. Yeah, they're either way. So this is called a gauge board. It's like a dashboard, just a board of gauges. So it's called a gauge board. And this is from a ship. And this is like in the back of the ship. You know, there's like a steam going, and right with it. It's got temperature and pressure. That's what drives the propeller. It drives the ship. There's all these pressures and all these things you need to monitor. These key metrics you need to monitor. You see them all here, and then these are the levers you control to like more steam, less steam, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's how my mental model is. These are my gauges for my key metrics, the dials for my key metrics to run my business or product, right? That's what I like to think about it, right? So let's go. Each metric is a gauge or a dial. That's how I like to think about each metric. Each metric or a gauge has a minimum value, minimum possible value, often 0. For percentage metric, it has a maximum possible value, often 100. For percentage metrics, it's going to be 100%. And it has a current value. So this is just a way to think about each metric, right? I couldn't find one that had a needle, so let's just pretend it's at 30. For every metric back on that equation of your business, like there's a min value, there's a max value, and there's where we are today, right? And what we want to do is look at the key metrics through that lens to figure out what are the critical few that are really going to make the big difference here. What's the upside potential for each one? How much do I think we can move the needle on that dial? Do we think we can move it 5 or 10? If we move that needle 5 or 10, what will the revenue impact be? Right? From the equation of the business, you can just calculate what it'll be. Usually, if it's 10% on one, it multiplies out to be 10% of revenue. And then the other side is great. How many resources will it take? If I think I can come up with ideas to move the needle 10%, is that going to take 3 developers a month, or is it going to take 1 developer a week? Like, what are we talking about? And you want to use that framework to figure out which metrics offer the best ROI. Right? So thinking about it as a dial and looking across all the dials to figure out which one has the biggest ROI. And so you want to then prioritize based on ROI, return on investment. So over here, this is a way to think about it, is return, the value created, or more specifically, like how much revenue, incremental revenue. We can get, if we've got tying it to revenue, we can talk about, hey, this idea is going to add 10K, we think this one's going to add 50K. So you can imagine numbers here that have to do with dollars, or you can imagine more abstract, just, hey, customer value. It's okay to be fuzzy on this too. And then over here, usually it's like some measure, the investment is typically developer time, weeks or months or something like that, right? And the idea, again, you don't have to be super precise. You can just throw these ideas up here. In the book, I also just mentioned using like a high, medium, low for both. You have a 3x3 of high, medium, low. That's fine too. But basically, you plot the ideas up here. So say we've got these two ideas. The team estimates that both will roughly deliver the same amount of value, 3 units of value, whether that's revenue or customer value. And this one's going to take twice as long as this one. Well, then idea A has twice the ROI roughly of B. Right? So you would pick that one first. A lot of times there are ideas that have comparable ROIs but different scope. So here we've got idea C is 2 units of value for 2 units of investment, right? ROI of 1. This one's 4 for 4, ROI of 1. In general, when you've got those situations, I recommend going for the smaller scope item. Why? 1, this will get in market sooner, so you'll get the revenue bump or the customer value bump more quickly. You'll get the feedback and learning of whether you got it right or not more quickly. The other thing is scope estimation error is nonlinear, right? So the chances of this guy slipping more than this guy is pretty high, right? If I say to you, hey, I'll have that to you in 5 minutes, I'm not going to slip 6 months on a 5-minute deadline. But if I say, yeah, we'll have the enterprise software for you in 18 months, don't worry. It could easily go 24 months, right? There are obviously bad ideas out there, right? Low value, high investment. The team feels the investment as you're working and working and working and working in that cave on that product. You feel it, and you assume it's going to be here, but because you didn't do the kind of lean product techniques I'm talking about, you don't realize, oh, geez, it wasn't an important need, it wasn't an underserved need, or the UX that we did wasn't good, whatever it is. So we want to try to avoid those bad ideas. And our job as product teams is to come up with these good ideas that have a really high ROI, by applying these techniques. And then I think really good product people can work with their engineering counterparts. There's almost always 80-20 at play. You don't necessarily need to build a whole thing to get most of the value. And so we can shave off the unessential components and get the scope down and have an even higher ROI, right? So you just want to run all the ideas you have. Once you've picked your top metric you want to focus on, or actually even here you can use it across all the metrics to figure out which metric offers the best ROI opportunity. Then you'll get your typical diminishing return curves. Like I said, okay, we're going to do idea A first because it's highest, then B, then C. And eventually you'll get diminishing returns and you'll go work on another metric. Now when you do this ROI analysis on the dials, there are typically three types of situations that you'll see, three profiles. The first is what I would call a good ROI situation. So what I've done here is you've got return here and investment here. The white line represents if we pursue the best ideas, the highest ROI improving ideas, what kind of trajectory we can expect to have. And the yellow dot is where we are today, right? So if we, with this, we can say, hey, with a little bit of investment to the right, we can move a lot vertically on the return, right? So that's a good ROI. Does that make sense? The next one is a bad ROI. Same thing here. We got return, investment, curve, yellow dots where we are today. Here, even if we put in a lot of investment, we're only going to get a little bit of return, right? This would be, for example, if we've already milked something and done all the low-hanging fruit and optimized it, we might be at this part of the curve, right? That's bad ROI. So those are what you mainly see. There's a third profile that you can see if you analyze the data very carefully. You can find these. They don't always exist, but they often exist, and they don't often exist for long, but they're there. What is this, where you've got a fundamentally different curve, and where you're at, by doing the right detailed analysis, you can find, hey, with a little bit of effort, we can actually get a lot of return. This is what I call silver bullet opportunities, metric opportunities, and they do exist, especially if you haven't started doing metrics optimization on a product. These exist in the early days. I want to close out with a case study real quick. So I was the head of product for Friendster back in the day. Anyone here use Friendster?
I remember.
Oh, too young. Too young. Yeah, exactly. So it was the first social network. And I was the head of product there. And when I joined, it was like a 50-person startup, early stage startup. Everyone in the building, I was like, hey, what do you guys think is important for us to focus on? Everyone was like, we gotta get new users from our existing users. We have to do viral growth. Like, we're not gonna buy users. We just need to get free users from our existing users. We need like virality. Viral new user growth is the most important thing. Everybody said that. I said, great. What have you guys done on that so far? Nothing. I'm like, okay. Like, what metrics do you have? Nothing. So I was starting the lean analytics process from scratch, right? So the first thing I had to do was, okay, what are the metrics that I'm going to track? We weren't tracking anything. So what I did is I said, okay, let me come up with a framework for the viral loop experience that I can then try to come up with metrics for. So the way it works is we have active users. They're using our product. They can choose to invite their friends. When they invite their friends, the prospective user gets an email. They either click on the link in the email or they don't. If they click on the link on the email, they get to our registration page. They either get through that or they don't. If they get through that, they become users, a certain percentage of which remain active and can then go on to invite other friends, right? So I just created this basic viral loop back in 2004. And I said, great, that's the kind of framework I want to create analytics for. What analytics do I create for this now? So the first thing I said was, okay, let's do a percentage. And I didn't actually cover this, but there's raw number metrics, like say your CEO came to you and said, hey, how good is our registration page doing? And said, let me check. Oh, we had 100,000 people yesterday and only 10,000 the day before, so it must be doing great. That's an absolute number metric. That's what I call a raw atomic metric, right? But maybe we just got on TechCrunch yesterday, or today or whatever, and that's why we have a big spike. It's not like our page suddenly magically got better, right? So it would be better if we created a ratio metric, a percentage. We said, okay, let's take how many people came to the page, how many people signed up, and divide how many people signed up by how many people came to the page. Then you get a percentage that's scale independent as volume changes and whether you get on TechCrunch or not, right? So that's the new power of a percentage metric, is they're easier to track over time, apples to apples. The next metric was, okay, not all users are inviting their friends in a given time period, or ever. For a given time period, let's say what percentage of users are sending invites. There's a second thing, when you invite people, you can invite one friend or 5 friends or 3 friends. You can invite multiple. So there's a second one, invites per sender. When they invite their friends, how many do they invite? There's just a click-through rate on the emails, the invitation emails, and then there's a registration conversion rate. Right? So these are the 5 metrics that I came up with to instrument this viral loop and see where try to figure out where the biggest opportunities were. So if you multiply those 5 together, they determine your viral ratio. Let's pretend you're the director of product management for Friendster back in the day, and everyone's saying, yeah, we got to improve viral growth, and you've gotten to this point. Which one offers the highest ROI? You have to decide which one to go after, right? Let's make it simpler. Let's narrow it down from 5 to 3. So let's say I'd love for people to vote with your choice. Percentage of user sending invites percent, or conversion rate. Which of these 3 would you want to improve? Who would want to improve percentage of user sending invites? Who would want to improve invites percentage? Who would want to improve registration conversion rate? Okay. You guys have a meeting again and say C? Is it? Okay. Remember what the next step, who knows what the next step in the process is after you determine your metrics? Remember what it was? Baseline values. Baseline values. So I asked you to vote before you had the baseline values. How about I give you the baseline values and we re-vote? That's the power, and I do it this way to show you the power of knowing nothing. You know nothing about Friendster, you know nothing about these things, but just by seeing the baseline values, just like that retention curve, your brain's going to have an opinion about which one you think is the best. Why don't we re-vote? So this one's at 15%, this is at 2.3, this is 85. Who now would focus on this metric as an improvement metric? More hands than last time, right? That's the power. Why? Because before you're like, I don't know, I just don't think that's a good one. Who would focus on this one now? And who would focus on this one now? And who's not voting? People aren't voting. Come on. So this one went way up, this one went way down. Anyway, right? That's the power of just knowing where we're at today, right? And there's a quick hack your brain is doing that you can do, which is what I call the upside potential of a metric. And it goes back to that dial, min value, max value, where are we at today, right? Registration process yield. What's the min value? 0. What's the max value? 100, because it's a percentage. Where are we at today? 85. Not knowing anything about it, this metric, can you tell me what the max possible improvement would be? 15 percentage points, right? And if we divide it by where we're at, that's a max of an 18% improvement. If we had the best team in the world and the best execution in the world, that's the most we could ever do, right? And I'm not saying we could get that or we could get 1 or 2, but just a quick hack is what's that? How about the second one? Percentage of users sending invites. It goes min value 0, max value on the gauge 100, current value on the gauge 15. What's the max possible improvement here? 85%. If we divide it by where we're at today, that's 570. That's why your brain, if you had to pick, you'd be like, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to focus on this one, not that one, right? Chances are we're going to find something. Again, I'm not saying we could get 85%, but there's a bigger opportunity. Yeah?
But that's not the direct comparison, right? You should also know the weightage, right? Here 15 could, the revenue means 500, let's say 500 revenue. Here 85 could mean 200 revenue. So I still want to go with the needle which will give me maximum revenue, right?
Yeah, but with the
without knowing that dimension?
There was the formula back here. They're all multiplied together, so they're all the same. 1 and 1 will mix 1 and the other, right? So it's just, that's how you know that, right? Yeah. Okay, that's those 2 metrics, right? The third one, what's the third one? Is basically average number of events 10%. What's the minimum value for that?
0.
What's the maximum value for that? Infinity! How many people in the world?
It's not going to happen.
Not like.
Yeah, so people get excited. Infinity! And it's like, wait, 8 billion! It's how many are on the internet? Okay, how many? Then it's like, well, you get down to how many friends does the average person have? It's like 150-ish, 200, something like that, right? There's some sociological research, right? So I don't really know. It's a question mark. But just by looking at the min and max values, is this the same or different than these percentages? It's a different metric fundamentally, right? And we're at 2.3. So we have x divided by 2.3 equals y. Like, it's definitely bigger than this one, right? I can bet on that. Is it bigger than this one? If we take 150 or even 100, it's going to be bigger than this one, right? We do the math on that. So this, I don't know, but it seems like it could be a silver bullet metric. Remember I talked about those? We're just a little bit, yeah?
I'd say that's one where the devil's in the details, because I want to know if you're including 0 invites in that number, or if that's average number of invites sent.
Oh, it's not,
per
because they're
sender
broke
who
out the way we
invited.
did the metrics. It's not. Yeah, it's not including 0, yeah. So.
You also have to consider new users, because they're going to be likely to invite a bunch of people right away versus users that have been on there for a while, and they're well,
There
I mean,
could be
your
big
friend may be
differences
on there.
between them. Yeah, we kind of blended it. I don't think that there were key differences because people were just kind of just doing it. But yeah, and we weren't around that long. It's not like we.
Yeah.
If you've been around for 10 years, yeah, like on Facebook, I'm not inviting people anymore, right? Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That could be. All right, so we've got this. We did this upside potential metric for hack. Is anyone feeling a sense of deja vu of something I said a little bit earlier? Remember I said there were 3 different profiles? A bad ROI profile, That's registration process yield. Right? We're at 85%. It's going to take a lot of effort to not move the needle much. There's a good ROI. That's this one. We're at 15%. A lot of upside that we can do. And there's a potential silver bullet ROI. We don't know yet, but it seems like it could be because we've got infinity, right? We've got a lot up there. We can go, if it's 150, we have a lot of headroom, right? The other thing I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know this, is back then, is you had to like type in your friends' email addresses. So no wonder people were only doing 2.3 on average. They don't remember them. They're going to type them in. It takes work, right? So we said, okay, for those reasons, we said, let's go after this one. We think it offers the biggest ROI, highest upside. Next step of the process is, okay, great, as a team, let's brainstorm what are all the different ways we can get people to increase the invites. And the top idea that we had, they're common now, but back then they weren't, was to do an address book importer, to make less effort, right? And say, okay, pull in your Gmail contacts and we'll like invite 100 people at a time instead of you having to type in 2 or 3 email addresses. So that was the top idea. Again, it's common now, but back then it wasn't. Even there, the way it worked is you had to build one for each of the different mail providers. So we had to say, okay, should we do it for Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo or what? Turns out at the time, most of our base was on Yahoo, so we used that as, again, to maximize the ROI. So let's do an MVP on Yahoo and see how it does, and if it does well, then we'll roll out the other ones. So that's what we did. It turns out the developer, it was like one developer for like a week and a half to build the Yahoo email importer. And here we are tracking along at 2.3, right? This is our data, a little bit of noise, 7-day average. We rolled out the improvement, and then it took a little while because of 7-day average, but we more than doubled it just with a week and a half of engineering work. So it turned out to be a silver bullet metric. Because of the equation of the business, that meant we got twice as many new users, or more than twice as many new users in that time period going forward. So I was pretty excited with that. So again, just to close out the lean product process, get clear on what your metrics are. The baseline values, I kind of showed you guys the power of that. You can use that upside potential hack if you don't know anything else. To figure out which one you should focus on. Then you get into the loop, and hopefully, it goes up and to the right as you learn and iterate. And eventually, at some point, you'll go back and pick the next metric that matters the most. I mentioned that I run a Meetup Group. It's meetup.com/lean-product. Our next speaker is April 19th. It's at Intuit in Mountain View. She gives one of the best talks on design for non-designers. Great job of explaining. I think PMs is valuable to know about design. I don't expect you to be designers, but I think it's very helpful. And she has a great talk that it conveys the principles. She wrote this book, Hello Web Design. So she's coming. It's free to join the group. It's $20 per event. We have dinner. I mentioned I'm a consultant. I recently have grown my team. I've added a senior PM level and a director level. I do more VP level. So if you or anyone you know is interested or might want help in product management, happy to chat with you guys about that. And then Brendan mentioned that they're doing these surveys on the sessions. So that's the URL. If you want to provide feedback, if you have any feedback directly, you can give it to me as well. Here's where to reach me. Again, Twitter, danolsen.com. I'll tweet out the book winner at lunch. I guess it's lunchtime now, so I'll tweet them out. And I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. So thanks.